What would you do if your own father on his deathbed left you a joke, not a story, not a lesson, a joke, written on paper, signed, sealed? Clara Bennett stood in a lawyer's office in Silver Line, New Mexico, and heard her inheritance read out loud. Her two older brothers got the ranch, the cattle, the bank accounts, every dollar their father had earned in 40 years of sweat. And Clara got a canyon, a dry, cracked, worthless canyon, 40 miles south, a place so useless the whole territory had a name for it: Bennett's Folly. Her brother laughed, the lawyer looked away, and Clara, 26 years old, holding her 9-year-old brother's hand, walked out into the sun with nothing but a piece of paper and a sick little boy who couldn't stop coughing. The town whispered. The town pitied her. The town wrote her off. But here's what the town didn't know. Here's what her brothers didn't know. Here's what even Clara didn't know, not yet. Her father hadn't left her a joke. He'd left her a message, written in stone, buried in silence, guarded by a secret so dangerous it had already cost a life. And before that first summer ended, Clara Bennett would stand at the edge of that canyon and discover the truth. Some inheritances aren't measured in gold. They're measured in stone that remembers. The sky over Silver Line was the color of old tin. Clara Bennett stood at the edge of her father's grave, 26 years old. Black dress, black boots, black gloves that didn't fit right. Beside her a small hand gripped hers. Silas, 9 years old, coughing. He always coughed when the wind came down from the mesa. The doctor called it weak lungs. Clara called it something else. She called it the thing she'd been fighting since the day their father brought Silas home, wrapped in a blanket the color of dust. The preacher was talking. Something about dust to dust. Something about the Lord. Clara didn't hear him. She was watching her brothers. Merritt stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, jaw hard. He hadn't looked at her once since they'd lowered the coffin. Elia stood behind him, shoulders sloped, eyes on the ground. Two brothers, same blood, different men, and neither of them had touched Silas. Not once. Not at the wake. Not at the funeral. Not when the boy had coughed so hard his little body doubled over and Clara had to hold him up with both arms. Nothing. Because Silas wasn't really theirs. Not the way Merritt saw it. Silas was the last piece of the woman their father had married after their own mother died. The woman named Rebecca. The woman who'd lived in the big house for 3 years and then one winter got sick and never got better. Clara remembered that winter. She'd been 20. Silas had been 3. And Merritt had smiled at Rebecca's funeral. Clara had never forgotten that smile. The service ended. The mourners drifted back toward town, slow, respectful. Clara stayed at the grave. Silas tugged her sleeve. "Sister." She looked down. "Can we go home now?" She swallowed. 'Cause that was the question, wasn't it? Home. They'd been sleeping at the boarding house for 3 nights. Ever since their father collapsed in the smithy. Ever since Merritt had walked into the ranch house and told her flat calm that she and the boy could stay through the funeral. And then they'd need to make other arrangements. Other arrangements. 2 words, cold as brass. Clara knelt down, fixed Silas's collar. "Soon, sweetheart." He looked at her with those gray-green eyes, his mother's eyes, Rebecca's eyes. He nodded, because he trusted her. He always trusted her, and Clara felt her heart crack a little. The lawyer's office was above the mercantile. Wooden stairs, creaky. A door with frosted glass and gold letters that said, "Whitcomb Attorney." Clara climbed. Silas climbed behind her. Merritt and Elias were already inside. Whitcomb sat behind his desk. Small man, bald head, fingers stained with ink. He didn't smile when Clara walked in. He didn't smile at all. That was the first sign. The second was the way he shuffled the papers. Twice. 3 times. Like a man about to read something he wished he didn't have to read. Clara sat down. Silas climbed into the chair beside her. His feet didn't touch the floor. Merritt sat across from them. He glanced at Silas, then away. Whitcomb cleared his throat. Jonah Bennett's last will and testament. He paused. Shall I proceed? It wasn't a question. Nobody answered. He proceeded. To my eldest son, Merritt Bennett, I leave the Bennett Ranch, the land, the house, the livestock. Merritt didn't move, but something in his shoulders relaxed. To my second son, Elias Bennett, I leave the sum of $5,000 and the ranch's south pasture, 140 acres. Elias blinked once. He hadn't expected that much. To my daughter, Clara Bennett, she held her breath. I leave the parcel of land known in the territory as Bennett's Folly. Silence. Merritt's mouth twitched. Clara didn't understand at first. She looked at Whitcomb, waiting for the next line, waiting for the part where her father remembered her. Whitcomb looked down at his papers. Then he looked at Clara, and she understood. That was all. That was everything. A dead canyon. Merritt laughed, not loud, just a huff of air through his nose, like he'd heard a joke he'd been waiting to hear. Clara turned to look at him. He wasn't smiling. He was studying her, the way a cat studies a bird that hasn't noticed it yet. Well, he said. Just that. Well. Whitcomb kept going, reading paragraphs about probate, executor duties. Clara didn't hear any of it. She was looking at Silas. Silas was looking at her, and didn't understand. He was 9. He didn't know what a parcel was. He didn't know what a folly was. He just knew his sister had gone very, very still. He put his hand on her arm. Sister. She patted his hand, because she couldn't speak yet. Because if she spoke, she'd break. And she wasn't going to break in front of Merritt. Not today, not ever. Whitcomb finished. Set the papers down. There is one more matter. He looked at Clara, then at Merritt, then at Silas. The disposition of the minor child. Silas Bennett. Clara's stomach dropped. Merritt spoke first. The boy will come to the ranch. Clara turned to him. No. Clara. No, Merritt. Merritt's voice stayed even. That was the frightening thing. He never raised it. You have no home. You have no income. You have a canyon full of rocks. The boy is sick. He needs care. Every word was true. Every word was a knife. He needs me, Clara said. Merritt smiled, just a little. He needs a family. Clara's hands curled into fists in her lap, because she saw it now. She saw the whole shape of it. Silas was a Bennett son. In this territory, a boy could inherit. A boy could grow up and file claims and demand his share. Merritt didn't want to raise him. Merritt wanted to own him. She looked at Whitcomb. What does the will say? Whitcomb wouldn't meet her eyes. The will is silent on the matter of the child's custody. My father didn't say anything. No, Miss Bennett. Clara stared at the lawyer, because she couldn't believe it. Her father had retained her out of the ranch. Fine, that was cruel enough. But he'd left the one thing she loved most in the world, the little boy she'd raised for 6 years, to be fought over like a piece of furniture. No, that wasn't her father. Something was wrong. Something was very, very wrong. She stood up. He is coming with me. Merritt didn't move. Clara, be reasonable. He is coming with me. You have nowhere to take him. Then I'll take him nowhere. She grabbed Silas's hand. She grabbed the deed off the desk. She turned toward the door. Clara, Merritt's voice, softer now, almost kind. She stopped. She shouldn't have, but she did. Think about the boy, he said. Think about what's best for him. You know he won't survive the summer out there. You know it. She turned around slowly. She looked at her older brother, really looked, at the face that had smiled at Rebecca's funeral, at the hands that had never once touched Silas, at the man who she suddenly absolutely terribly knew was not asking her a question. He was giving her a warning. Merritt, she said. Yes, stay away from my brother. She walked out, Silas half running to keep up. The frosted glass door swung shut behind them with a soft final click. She stopped at the boarding house. Their bags were already on the porch. Mrs. Delacroix, the widow who ran the place, stood in the doorway. Twisted hands. I'm so sorry, dear. Clara blinked. What? Your brother. He paid your bill through tonight. He said you'd be moving on. Clara stared at the bags. Merritt hadn't waited. Merritt hadn't even come to the funeral thinking she might refuse. He'd already decided. He'd already moved her out. "Where am I supposed to go tonight, Mrs. Delacroix?" The old woman looked at her feet. "I'd let you stay, dear, I would. But he owns the mortgage on this house, you see, since your father passed." "Of course he did. Of course." Clara nodded, once, sharp. "Thank you for telling me." She picked up the bags. Silas picked up his little satchel, the one with his tin soldiers. They walked back into the sun. They spent the afternoon at the livery, not because they had anywhere to be, but because Buck was there. Their father's old buckskin, 15 years old, slow, loyal. And Buck was the last thing in the world that still felt like home. Clara brushed him, slow strokes, the way her father had taught her. Silas sat on a barrel, watching. The liveryman, Mr. Odell, kept his distance. Everyone in town knew by now the Bennett girl. Cut out of the will, cut out of the town. Nobody wanted to be seen helping her. Except O'Dowell. He came over at sundown, set a tin cup of coffee on the barrel next to Silas. "For your sister," he said. He didn't look at Clara, but she saw the way his jaw was set. She'd remember that later. Before he walked away, he paused. He said quietly, "There's a man been asking about you, Miss Bennett." Clara looked up. "What man?" "Skinny fella. Rode in yesterday. Been drinking at the saloon. Asking when you were leaving town. What direction you were headed. Name of Reeves. Not the Sorbo. Different Reeves. Cousin of his, maybe." Clara felt something cold slide down her spine. She said, "Do you know who hired him?" Odell looked at her. He said, "I have my guesses, ma'am." He walked back to the stalls. Clara stood there with the brush in her hand. Silas said, "Sister, who is Reeves?" She said, "Nobody, sweetheart." But it wasn't nobody, it was somebody. Somebody her brother had paid. An hour before dark, an old woman walked into the livery. Clara didn't see her at first. She was cleaning Buck's hooves. She only noticed when Silas stood up. Very slowly, Clara turned. The woman was small, bent, older than any person Clara had ever seen up close. Her face was 100 rivers. Her hair was the color of wood ash. She was Apache. She had never spoken to Clara before. She spoke now. "Girl." Clara straightened up. "Ma'am." The woman looked at Buck, then at Silas, then for a very long time at Clara. "Come here." Clara walked over, slowly. The old woman reached into a leather pouch at her belt, pulled something out, a small square, folded, rawhide. She pressed it into Clara's palm and closed her fingers over it. "You are going south." "Yes, ma'am." "To the Stone place." Clara's breath caught. "How do you know that?" The old woman smiled. The way people smile at something they've been waiting a long time to see. "Your father came to me 21 years ago. He asked me a question." "What question?" "Where the water hides." Clara stared at her. The old woman's eyes were black. Not brown. Black. Like river stones. "He was a good man, your father. A quiet man. But he had eyes. He saw what other men did not." She tapped Clara's closed fist. "Do not open this until you are inside the canyon. Do not show it to your brothers. Do not show it to any man on the road." Clara nodded. Because she couldn't speak, the old woman turned to leave, then stopped. She looked back over her shoulder. "My name is Ayita. When you come out of the canyon, come find me. I have known your family longer than you know." And she walked out into the dusk. Silas came to Clara's side. "Sister, what did she give you?" Clara looked down at her closed hand. "I don't know yet," she said. "Is it magic?" She almost laughed. "No, sweetheart, it's not magic." But she didn't sound sure, not even to herself. They slept in the loft above the stables. Odell said he wouldn't charge them. Clara lay on the straw with Silas curled against her side. He fell asleep quickly. He always did. Sleep was the one place where his lungs didn't fight him. Clara didn't sleep. She stared at the wooden beams and thought about her father. Jonah Bennett, 63 years old when he died. A blacksmith, a rancher, a man who never wasted a word. He'd been strange in his last year, distracted, distant. He'd taken long rides alone and come back caked in red dust and refused to say where he'd been. Merritt had said the old man was going soft in the head. Clara had defended him. But now Clara wondered. She sat up in the straw. She pulled the rawhide square from her pocket. She unfolded it. 3 circles, in a triangle, and an arrow pointing between them. She stared at it. She turned it, looked at it upside down, sideways. She had no idea what it meant, but her father had known. She folded the rawhide back up, put it in her pocket, lay back down. Beside her, Silas coughed in his sleep. She pulled him closer. She thought for the first time all day that maybe her father had not left her a joke. Maybe. Morning came the color of ash. Clara packed, slowly. She took what she owned, a change of clothes, a tin of her mother's sewing needles, a worn book of poems that had belonged to Amelia, her mother, who died when Clara was 12. Not murdered, just sick. The kind of sick that took a woman one cough at a time until there was nothing left. Amelia would have known what to do. Amelia had been gone 14 years. Clara was on her own now. Well, not alone. She looked at Silas. He was buttoning his little coat. Wrong buttons. She knelt down and fixed them. He grinned at her. Her heart squeezed. They rode out at 8 in the morning. Buck was carrying 2 of them. Clara in the saddle. Silas on a folded blanket behind her. They passed through the main street of Silverline. The town was awake. Vendors were setting up carts. A boy was sweeping the boardwalk. Nobody waved. Nobody said good morning. They watched her ride out. Silent. Curious. The way people watch a funeral procession they haven't been invited to. Clara kept her chin up. Silas rested his cheek against her back. They passed the last building. The blacksmith's, her father's old shop. Someone had already put up a sign. For sale. Merritt hadn't even waited a week. Clara looked away. She nudged Buck into a walk, south. They rode until noon. The land changed slowly. Grass gave way to scrub. Scrub gave way to sand. The sky opened up until it was the only thing in the world. Silas talked for the first hour. Then he got quiet. Then he coughed. Then he got quiet again. Clara watched him carefully. She stopped every hour, made him drink water, made him eat a little bread, watched his color. He was tired, but he was holding on. They camped that night in a dry wash. Clara built a small fire from mesquite. She made coffee. She cooked the bacon. Silas ate 2 pieces and fell asleep against her arm. She sat with him, listening to the desert. She looked up at the stars. There were so many. Clara had grown up under stars, but these were different, closer, sharper. She thought about her father, about Merritt, about the way Whitcomb had read the will like a man reading the top of an iceberg. Something was underneath. She would find it. She heard the horse at 3 in the morning. She didn't hear it right away. She was half asleep. Silas was curled tight against her ribs. The fire was down to embers. But something woke her. She lay still, listening. A hoof, soft, deliberate, then another, then nothing. Clara didn't move. Her hand slid slow toward the rifle beside her bedroll. She waited, then a single faint sound. A saddle creak, very close. Someone was watching her camp. Not a coyote, a man. Clara's throat went dry. She lay there, rifle in her hand, Silas asleep against her chest. Minutes passed, then the sound changed. The hoof again, retreating, then gone. Clara didn't move for a long time. She stared into the dark. She thought of Odell's voice at the livery. Name of Reeves, not the surveyor. She thought of her brother's calm face in the lawyer's office. Somebody had been paid. Somebody was watching. She didn't sleep again that night. At dawn, she got up. Silas was still asleep. She walked a slow circle around the camp. She found the tracks. 200 feet out, a single horse, shod, heavy. It had stopped there, stood a while, then turned around and gone back north, toward Silverline. She knelt down and looked at the hoof print. There was a nick in the shoe, a small V shape missing from the front edge. She'd remember that. The second day was harder. The heat came down like a hand. Buck slowed. Silas got tired. Clara made him ride in the saddle in front of her, leaning back against her chest while she walked alongside holding the reins. She wasn't going to break Buck, not for anything. They walked, mile after mile. The country turned to broken red rock, mesas rising in the distance, like the ruins of a city no one remembered. Silas fell asleep against her. Clara walked. She thought about her mother, Amelia, long dark hair, a soft laugh, hands that smelled like flower and lavender. She thought about Rebecca, bright and quick, a widow when Jonah married her, Silas's mother. She taught Clara, a 19-year-old girl at the time, how to bake bread properly, how to salt a ham, how to press wildflowers in a book. Rebecca had been kind. Rebecca had loved Clara like a daughter. And then Rebecca had gotten sick, fast, wrong fast. The doctor had never figured out what killed her. Merritt had smiled at her funeral. Clara clenched her jaw. She kept walking. They came to the mouth of the canyon at 4 in the afternoon on the third day. Clara stopped for a long time. Just stopped because Bennett's Folly was worse than she'd imagined. The cliffs rose 200 feet on either side. Sheer, red, cracked. The canyon floor was a chaos of boulders and mesquite and thorn brush. No grass, no water, no shade. It looked like a wound in the earth. Silas woke up. He stared at it. He didn't speak. Clara felt something break inside her. She hadn't let it break in the lawyer's office. She hadn't let it break at the boarding house. But now. Now she stood at the mouth of her inheritance. And her brother had won. And her little brother was riding a 15-year-old horse into a place with no water. And she had a piece of rawhide with 3 circles on it, and no idea what any of it meant. She turned away so Silas couldn't see her face. She pressed her palm against Buck's shoulder, and she cried, silent, fast, hot tears into the buckskin's dusty coat. Buck stood still. He always stood still. He was the only man in her life who had never once let her down. She wiped her face on her sleeve. She turned around. Silas was looking at her, not with pity, with patience. He said very quietly, "It's okay, sister. We can be brave together." Clara nodded. She couldn't speak. She held out her arms. He slid down from the saddle into them. She held him for a long time. She thought, "I don't care what it takes. I will keep him alive." They made camp just inside the canyon's mouth. Clara built a fire against the base of a boulder. She fed Silas the last of the good bread. She made him drink almost all the water. She checked his forehead. No fever, thank God. The sun went down. The rocks held the heat. Clara lay on her bedroll. Silas curled against her. The stars came out. Millions of them. She pulled the rawhide out of her pocket, held it up in the firelight. 3 circles. She'd been looking at it wrong. She sat up. 3 circles, in a triangle, and an arrow pointing between them. She stood, slowly. She looked around the canyon floor. Boulders everywhere. But over there, off to the west side, 3 of them. 3 big ones, standing close together in a triangle. Her breath caught. She walked toward them. She stood in the middle of the 3. She turned in a slow circle. The arrow pointed west, toward the far cliff wall, 200 feet of jumbled rocks. And somewhere in there, somewhere her father had known, was something. Clara stood in the moonlight between the 3 stones. She whispered she didn't know why, but she whispered, "Papa," and the canyon whispered back. Just the wind, but it sounded for one strange, quiet moment like a voice she used to know, like a voice saying, "Keep going." She walked back to the fire. She lay down beside Silas. She pulled him closer. She said not out loud, but in the place inside her where she had said it since Rebecca had died, "I have got you." He sighed in his sleep. She closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would start. Tomorrow. For now, for tonight, she was going to sleep in the belly of Bennett's Folly, under the stars, with her little brother in her arms, and whoever had put that nick in the horseshoe. They were about to find out that Clara Bennett was not the woman they thought she was. She was her father's daughter. And her father, it turned out, had been keeping secrets. The first morning in Bennett's Folly, Clara woke before the sun. Her shoulders ached, her back ached. Her hands were already stiff from 3 days of holding reins. Silas was still asleep, curled small. She watched him for a long moment. Then she got up, quiet, careful. The canyon was cold at dawn. Blue shadows, the kind of cold that surprises you in a place you thought would only ever be hot. Clara pulled her shawl tight, walked to the 3 boulders. She stood between them again, in daylight, and she saw what she hadn't seen at night. The arrow, if she followed it, didn't just point west, it pointed at a specific place on the far cliff. A place where the wall bulged outward slightly, where the shadows were wrong. She hadn't noticed that in the dark. She noticed it now. She hiked the length of the canyon before Silas woke. Half a mile, boulder to boulder, notes in her head. Water none she could see. Wood plenty of dry mesquite. Shelter the far end had a natural overhang of rock. She'd move camp today. She turned back, and that was when she saw it. High up on the west cliff, 200 feet above the canyon floor, a flash of light. Sharp, bright, gone. Clara stopped walking. She stared at the spot. Nothing. Just red rock. She counted her heartbeats. Waited. The flash didn't come again. She squinted. Tried to memorize where it had been. The pattern of cracks around it. A small dark spot to the left that looked like an eye. Then she walked back to camp. Fast. Because Silas was awake and calling for her. Sister. Right here. Where were you? Just looking around. I got scared. She knelt down, put her palm against his cheek. Warm. Not fever warm, just morning warm. I'm sorry, sweetheart. Don't do that again. I won't. She meant it. She would break that promise, but not yet. They spent the morning setting up a real camp. Under the overhang at the far end. Out of the wind. Shaded from the worst of the afternoon sun. Clara built a fire ring. Stacked their supplies. Made a soft place for Silas. Out of blankets and the softest sand she could find. Buck. She tied to a mesquite where he could reach a little dry grass. By noon, it looked almost like a home. Silas played with his tin soldiers on a flat rock. Clara watched him and thought. She thought about the flash of light. She thought about the 3 boulders and the arrow. She thought about the rider in the dark. And she thought about the water. Because she'd counted their canteens that morning. 2 full, 1 half. That was it. 3 days. Maybe 4 if she rationed. She had to find water. Or she had to go back. And going back was not an option. At 2 in the afternoon, the flash came again. Same place. Same brightness. Clara stood in the middle of the canyon and stared up at it. Silas came to her side. He looked up. Sister, what is that? I don't know. It looks like a mirror. She looked down at him. He was 9 years old. He'd said the word in maybe a quarter second. Mirror. Of course. Clara turned to Silas. You are the smartest boy in this territory. He grinned, but her mind was already spinning. Because who puts a mirror on a cliff face? And why? The path up looked impossible. Sheer for the first 30 feet. Then a scree slope of loose rock rising to a narrow ledge. Clara stood at the base and studied it. She wasn't going up today, not with Silas here alone, but she was going up. Soon. That night, she heard the horse again, same time, 3 in the morning, same soft, deliberate hoof fall. The rider didn't come close this time. He stayed at the mouth of the canyon. He waited a long time. Then he left. Clara didn't sleep again. She lay awake watching the stars and thinking, he's checking on us. He wants to see if we're still here. He wants to know we haven't given up. Which meant somebody wanted her to give up. She started clearing a path at first light on day 4. She'd chosen a route to the base of the scree slope. Through the worst of the thorn brush, she used a small hand axe and a camp knife and her bare hands when she had to. The mesquite fought her. The catclaw acacia tore her skin. Sweat rolled into her eyes and stunk. By mid-morning, her hands were bleeding. By noon, she'd cleared 10 feet. Silas watched her from the shade. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, Sister, rest. She looked over at him. I will, soon. You said soon 3 times. She almost laughed. She sat down, drank water. wiped her forehead. Silas came over, sat beside her, very serious. Papa used to do this, he said. She turned. Do what? Get quiet. When something was hard, he'd get quiet. Clara stared at her little brother. When did you see Papa do that? Lots of times. When? Silas thought. When he came back from his rides, he'd be quiet for a long time. Then he'd start working on something in the shop. And after a while, he'd be normal again. Clara sat very still. Because Silas, 9 years old, had noticed it. Had seen it. Their father's silent returns from wherever he'd been going. Silas remembered. Clara had known her father was disappearing. She'd known for a year, but she'd been so busy running the house, tending Silas, managing the kitchen garden, that she'd let it be a fact and not a question. Silas had let it be a question, the way children do. She kept working. By day 5, she'd cleared 30 feet. By day 6, she'd cleared the whole thing to the base of the slope. Her hands were a mess. Her arms were crossed with thorn scratches. Her back was one long ache. But she'd done it. And that afternoon, her shovel hit something metal. Clink. Sharp. Bright. Clara stopped, knelt, dug with her fingers. Something in the dirt. She pulled it out, brushed it off. A pickaxe head, rusted, old. The wooden handle rotted away long ago. She turned it over and saw the stamp. A small W inside a circle. Her father's mark. Every tool he'd ever made bore that stamp. Clara sat down in the dirt. She held the pickaxe head with both hands. And she understood for the first time, really understood, that her father had been here. Not once. Not to look at it. He'd been here to work. He'd been here to build something. She looked up at the cliff, at the flash of light, at the ledge, 200 feet above her. Her father had climbed that. Her father, 63 years old, moving slower than he used to. Her father had climbed that. She wiped her eyes with the back of her wrist. You stubborn old man, she whispered. The wind moved through the canyon. She almost thought she heard him answer. The next morning, a stranger rode into the canyon. Clara heard him before she saw him. Hooves. Steady. She grabbed the rifle. She put Silas behind the boulder. Stay. But sister. Stay. He stayed. Clara stepped out into the open. Rifle up. The rider came around the bend. He was young. 30 maybe. Lean. Sandy hair. A dust-colored duster coat. He saw the rifle. He raised both hands, slowly. Ma'am. Stop where you are. He stopped. I'm not armed. I mean, I've got a sidearm, but I'm not reaching. Who are you? Nathaniel Reeves, territorial surveyor. Clara's finger tightened on the trigger. Reeves. He heard the change in her voice. He looked confused. Yes, ma'am. Any relation to a man asking questions in Silverline this week? His confusion deepened. Ma'am, I don't know what you mean. A skinny man named Reeves. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He said, My cousin, Vern Reeves. Clara said, Your cousin has been asking about me. Nathaniel was silent for a moment. Then he said, Ma'am, if Vern is anywhere near this, I did not know it. And if you let me speak, I can tell you why I'm here. And you can decide for yourself. She kept the rifle up. She said, Speak. He said, May I get down? Slowly. He got down. Slowly. He faced her. He took off his hat. He had honest eyes. She hated that she noticed. I was hired to survey this canyon 11 months ago. Her stomach dropped. By who? By Jonah Bennett. Silence. She almost lowered the rifle. She didn't, but almost. When did he last hire you? 2 months before he died. Did he tell you what would happen after? He gave me a letter, sealed. He said, if I ever met a woman named Clara Bennett in this canyon, I was to give it to her. And then if she wanted me to leave, I'd leave. Clara's throat went dry. Do you have the letter? In my saddlebag. She nodded. He got it. Slow. He handed it to her. She looked at the envelope. Her father's handwriting. Sharp. Neat. The letter C for Clara. She almost couldn't hold it. Sister. Silas's voice from behind the boulder. Clara turned. It's all right, sweetheart. You can come out. He came out slowly, watching Nathaniel. Nathaniel smiled at him. Hello, young man. Hi. That's a fine set of soldiers you had going over there. How did you see them? I was watching. Silas nodded, as if that were a perfectly good answer. Clara looked at Nathaniel. She said, "You'll camp at the mouth of the canyon tonight, not up here." "Yes, ma'am." "I'll read the letter alone." "Yes, ma'am." And Nathaniel, "Yes, ma'am. If your cousin comes anywhere near this canyon, I will know why." He looked her in the eye. He said, "If he comes near this canyon, ma'am, I will send him back myself." She believed him. She hated that she believed him. She waited until Silas was asleep. She sat by the fire. She opened the envelope, her father's handwriting. Careful, cramped, she read, "Clara, if Nathaniel gave you this, you are in the canyon, which means you did not turn back, which means you are stronger than I hoped for a great deal. I am dying. I have known for some months. The doctor in Santa Fe told me last spring. I did not tell you, because if I had, you would have spent your last months of me nursing me instead of preparing. There are things I could not tell you while I lived. Merritt is watchful. Merritt has always been watchful. If he had suspected that I was leaving you anything of value, he would have moved against us both while I was too weak to protect you. So I left you a joke, publicly, loudly. A dry canyon everyone in the territory laughs about, because a laughing town is not a curious town. But there is more here than laughter, Clara. There is a great deal more. Look at the west cliff. There is a place where the sun catches. That is the way in. There is a path. It is hard. I climbed it many times over the years. If an old man could do it, a strong young woman can do it. Nathaniel is the son of a man I trusted. His father saved my life once a long time ago in a fight neither of us should have been in. When I was dying, I wrote to that man and asked him to send his son to watch over you. A warning, Clara. Nathaniel has a cousin named Vern. Vern works for money and asks no questions. Merritt may have hired him. If a man named Reeves has been sniffing around Silverline, that is who he is. Vern is not dangerous by himself, but he's a set of eyes and those eyes have a price. I am running out of time to write. So listen, Merritt killed Rebecca. I do not have proof. I never had proof. But I know. Elias saw something. I do not know what. I only know that he stopped speaking to Merritt for a full month after the funeral. Reach him if you can. He is weak, but he is not evil. There is a difference. Silas is safe with you. He is only safe with you. Do not under any circumstance let Merritt take him. I love you, Clara. I loved you every day I was alive. Every day I was silent. I saw you. I always saw you, Papa. Clara read it twice, then 3 times. Then she folded it carefully, put it in her lap, pressed both hands flat against it, and she sat there. The fire cracked. Silas breathed. She did not cry. She was past crying. She sat. Because everything had just changed, and everything had always been what it now seemed. And Rebecca, kind Rebecca, who taught her to bake bread, had been murdered. And Merritt was hunting them. She looked at Silas, sleeping, cheek in his palm. She thought he wasn't just cutting me out. He was setting a trap. He wanted me isolated, alone, where nobody would see, where nobody would come looking. Clara stood up, silent. She walked to the mouth of the canyon. She looked north, toward Silverline. She said out loud to the wind, to her father, "I see you now, Merritt." She meant it as a promise. She climbed the cliff the next day. She left Silas with Nathaniel. She had to think about that for a long time, whether to trust him. In the end, she did, because Silas had watched Nathaniel that morning, watched him make coffee, watched him whittle a little wooden horse and hand it to him without a word. Silas had said quietly, "I like him, sister." That was worth something. Clara took the rifle. She took a canteen. She took the rawhide square from her pocket. She kissed the top of Silas's head. She said, "If I'm not back by sundown, take Buck and ride." Nathaniel said, "Ma'am, I'll get him out." She nodded. She turned toward the cliff. The path was worse than it looked. The scree slope moved under her boots. Every step was a small avalanche. She grabbed at outcrops. Her palms bled again. Her arms shook. She thought about her father, 62 years old, climbing this. She kept going. The ledge was worse. A foot wide, sometimes less. A drop of 100 feet on her left. She pressed her body against the rock. She did not look down. She followed it. Slowly. She thought, I am going to die on this ledge. Then she thought, no. No. She kept going. She reached the wider terrace. She stood there, panting, and she looked at the wall in front of her. There it was, the mirror. A small square of glass, no bigger than her hand, set flush into the stone, so skillfully placed that from more than 10 feet away, it looked like part of the rock. She ran her fingers over it. She traced the seam. The stone around it wasn't natural. It was dressed, cut and fitted by a mason. She followed the wall. She found the door, a massive slab of sandstone, perfectly shaped, resting on hidden hinges, no handle. Just a small finger-sized depression near the edge. She put her fingers in it. She pulled. Nothing. She pulled harder. Nothing. She sat down. She stared at the door. She was so tired. She had climbed a cliff. She had bled. She had made it. And now nothing. She almost laughed. She almost cried. Instead, she made herself breathe. She looked at the rock around the door, and she saw 3 small marks carved into the stone, 3 dots in a triangle. Clara went very still. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the rawhide square, unfolded it. 3 circles in a triangle. She held it up to the marks. They matched. She pressed her 3 fingertips against the 3 dots, together, at the same time. Something clicked deep in the stone. The door began to move, slow, silent. Cool air poured out, cool, damp, alive. Clara stared at the opening. She whispered, "Papa." She stepped inside. The room was carved from the living rock. A single shaft of light from the small window fell across a workbench. Tools hung above it in neat rows, hammers, chisels, saws, every one of them stamped with the W inside a circle. A cot was built into an alcove, a mattress stuffed with dry grass, a hand-carved table, a chair, a wooden shelf with tin cups, and a small iron skillet. And in the corner, the sound she couldn't place at first, the stone basin. Beneath a dark wet patch on the ceiling, water dripping, slow, steady. A spring, a hidden, living, ceaseless spring. Clara pressed her hand over her mouth. Water. Her father had left her water, in a country where water was worth more than gold. She stood up very still. She did not cry, not this time. She simply stood and breathed and let the truth of it settle into her bones. For her mother, for Rebecca. For every year, she thought her father didn't see her. She looked around the room again. On the table, a tin box, small, rusted at the edges. She lifted the lid. Inside, a journal, leather-bound, worn. Her father's handwriting on the first page. "This is for you, Clara. Everything I could not say." She read for 2 hours. She learned about her mother, Amelia, about how they'd met at a barn dance in San Antonio when Jonah was 28 and Amelia was 22, about how Amelia had laughed at his boots. She learned about Rebecca, about how Jonah had met her 3 years after Amelia died, about how they had married quietly, about how Merritt had refused to attend the wedding. She learned about Silas being born, about the joy, about the fear, because Merritt had said at Rebecca's baby shower, "There won't be room for another son on this ranch." She learned about Rebecca getting sick. I searched her room after she died. In the drawer of her bedside table, tucked behind a Bible she never opened, I found a small brown bottle, no label, empty. I smelled it. Almond. Bitter almond. The smell that means something in an apothecary book. The smell of a slow poison. I did not go to the sheriff. I could not. Merritt would have said Rebecca put it there herself. And Silas. 3 years old, Silas would have been placed in his uncle's care while I stood trial. So I said nothing. For 6 years, I said nothing. I let him believe he had won. But I was watching Clara every day. And I was building this room, stone by stone, trip by trip, so that when I was gone, there would be a place he could not reach you. Keep him safe. Keep him safe. Keep him safe. Clara closed the journal. She sat in the cool stone room. Her father's stone room. She thought about all those evenings she'd waited up for him, worrying, wondering where he was. He'd been here, building her a fortress. She whispered, I understand now, Papa. The water dripped. The stone held its silence. She climbed down before sundown. Silas ran to her the moment she reached the canyon floor. Sister, she caught him, held him tight. You're okay, he said, into her shirt. I'm okay. I was scared. I know. Nathaniel made me soup. She looked over Silas's head at Nathaniel, who was standing by the fire, wiping his hands on a rag, not looking at her, not intruding. She said thank you. He said ma'am. That was all. But she saw him smile a little, just the corner of his mouth. That night she told them, Silas, she told the parts he could hear, that their father had built a beautiful stone house up in the cliffs, that they were going to live there, that it was safe. Silas's eyes went wide. A house in the mountain, like a king's castle. Better. Can I see it tomorrow? Yes, sweetheart, tomorrow. He was asleep in 10 minutes. Then she told Nathaniel the rest, the letter, the journal, Rebecca, Merritt, his cousin Vern. Nathaniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet a long time. Then he said, Clara. She looked up. He'd used her name. He said, your brother is going to come here. I know. He may bring men. He may bring Vern. I know. Nathaniel looked at her across the fire. Then we have to be ready, she said. He said. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him, his honest eyes. The wooden horse he'd whittled for Silas sitting on a rock beside the fire. She said, thank you. He said, don't thank me yet. They moved into the stone house the next day. It took 3 trips up and down the cliff to bring everything. Buck stayed below in a small 3-sided shelter Clara found built against the base another thing her father had made. Silas walked through the stone rooms like a boy in a dream. Sister, look, a bed built into the wall. Yes. Sister, look, water coming from the rock. Yes. Sister, yes. Papa did this. Yes, sweetheart, Papa did this. Silas sat on the cot. He put his little hands flat against the stone wall. He said very quietly, he must have loved us so much. Clara turned away. She did not want him to see her face. For 4 days, they lived in peace. Clara aired out the bedding, cleaned the tools, filled the water crocks, cooked simple meals over a small stove her father had built into a niche vented up through the rock. Silas got stronger. His color came back. His cough eased. The cool, damp air of the stone rooms was better for his lungs than anything the doctor had ever prescribed. Nathaniel camped on the terrace outside. He respected the boundary without being told. He worked. He studied the canyon. He drew maps. He rode out once a day, tripped to the nearest waterhole 3 miles east, and came back with a rabbit and a report. 2 riders, he said. West Rim, watching the mouth of the canyon. Clara's blood went cold. How long? Been there since yesterday from the sign. Do they know we're up here? They know somebody is up here. There's smoke from your stove. Clara looked at the small vent, a wisp of pale gray, barely visible against the sky. Her father had thought of everything, but not a stove that didn't smoke. She looked at Nathaniel. How long do we have? 2 days, maybe 3. She nodded. Then we get ready. Down at the mouth of the canyon, 150 feet below them, a small fire burned in the shelter of a boulder. 3 men. Merritt Bennett sat with his hat pushed back, studying a map by the firelight. Elias sat farther out, watching the sparks rise. And the third man, the hired one, sat cleaning a rifle. He was broad, scarred, older than the brothers. His name was Kellan. He said without looking up, the boy up there, how old is he? Elias glanced at him. 9. Merritt didn't look up from the map. Kellan turned the rifle in his hands. He said quietly, I have a boy. Elias blinked. You do. In El Paso. His mother died 2 winters back. He lives with her sister now. I send money when I can. Elias said, how old? 9. The word landed in the fire and stayed there. Elias said, what's his name? Tomás. Merritt looked up, slowly. He said, Kellen. Kellen met his eyes. Yes, Mr. Bennett. I'm not paying you to talk about your son. Kellen held his gaze. He said quietly, No, sir, you are not. But he set the rifle down. Careful, deliberate. And he did not pick it back up. Elias watched him, watched the way Kellen's jaw had set, watched the way the man looked into the fire. Elias thought he knows. He knows this isn't what he was told it was. And for the first time in a long time, Elias Bennett felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope, not for himself, for someone else. The storm came on the fifth day. Clara had been watching the sky since morning. The clouds gathered in the northeast, dark, bruised, moving fast. Silas came to stand beside her on the terrace. Sister, is that a monsoon? Yes, sweetheart. Papa said monsoons are the desert's temper. She smiled at that. She hadn't heard it before. Then this is going to be a big temper. Are we safe? Yes. Is Buck safe? She looked down at the little three-sided shelter. Buck was already inside it, ears twitching. He knew. Yes, Buck is safe. Is Nathaniel safe? Clara turned. Nathaniel was tying down his gear on the terrace. She hesitated. Then she said, Nathaniel, come inside. He looked up. She said, It's about to rain. He gathered his things. He came inside. Silas grinned, like he'd been waiting for that. The storm hit at 4 in the afternoon. Wind first, screaming down the canyon. Then rain, sheets of it, lightning cracking so close the stone walls seemed to hum. They stood at the small window, watching. The dry canyon floor turned to a river in minutes. Muddy, furious, carrying boulders and uprooted mesquite. Clara thought nobody is crossing that, for a while. Then the flood would drop, and whoever was watching would come. She looked at Nathaniel. He looked back at her. She said, How much time? He said, Until dawn, maybe. She nodded. She looked at Silas. She said, Sweetheart, I need you to be brave tonight. He looked up at her. He said, I'm always brave with you. The storm passed at midnight. The rain stopped. The wind died. The stars came out over a washed, gleaming canyon. The flood in the canyon floor began to recede, slowly. Clara stood at the window and watched. She saw them come, 3 figures, riding along the west rim, working their way down to the canyon mouth, waiting for the water to drop. She said to Nathaniel, It's Merritt. He said, Yes. She said, He brought 2 men. He said, I saw. She said, One of them is Elias. Nathaniel looked at her sharply. How can you tell? The way he sits a horse. Nathaniel nodded slowly. And the other? Clara stared out the window. The third rider was bigger than Elias, sat differently. She said, I don't know, but it's not Vern. Nathaniel said, How can you tell that? Vern is skinny. Odell said so. This man is broad. He knows how to sit a horse. He's a professional. Nathaniel checked his rifle. He said, A hired gun. She said, Yes. Heinz said, Then we assume the worst. She sat with Silas. As the sky began to gray toward dawn, she was going to have to tell him some of it, enough. She said, Sweetheart, yes, Merritt is coming. Silas went still. He said, I don't want to go with him. You're not going with him. He wants to take me. I know he does. He is not going to. Silas looked up at her. Papa didn't like him, did he? Clara's throat closed. She said, No, sweetheart, Papa didn't. I didn't either. I know you didn't. Silas thought for a long time. Then he said, Sister, if he tries to take me, what do I do? Clara looked at her little brother. His mother's eyes, his father's stubborn jaw. 9 years old, and asking her a question no 9-year-old should have to ask. She said, You stand behind me, and you don't move, no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says. He nodded. Very seriously. He said, Okay. She said, Silas, yes, I love you more than anything in this world. He looked at her. He said, I know. And then he said something she would remember for the rest of her life. He said, Mama told me. Clara froze. What made Mama? Before she died. She told me you would always take care of me. Silas, you were 3. I know, but I remember. Clara pressed her hand against her mouth. Silas said, I remember her hair. It was warm. She smelled like flower. Clara couldn't speak. He said, she told me, Silas, Clara is your sister and she loves you. She said it a lot. Clara pulled him against her. She held him and she rocked him. Because Merritt was coming. The sun was rising. The flood was falling. She kissed the top of Silas's head. She whispered into his hair into the stone room, into the memory of the woman who had smelled like flower. Rebecca, I have got him. I've always got him. Down in the canyon hoofbeats, 3 riders, crossing the mud, coming up the path. Merritt's voice rose in the dawn air. Merritt's voice rose in the dawn air, calm, almost polite. Clara, she stiffened. Clara, I know you're up there. Nathaniel moved to the window, rifle ready. Clara, come down and let's talk. Silas gripped her hand. Clara stood up, slowly. She walked to the doorway. She stepped out onto the terrace. The morning light hit her. Below, 100 feet down, 3 men on horseback stood at the base of the path. Merritt, in the middle, hat pushed back, rifle across his saddle. Elias, to his left, looking at his hands. And Kellan, broad, scarred. A revolver on each hip. Merritt looked up at her. He smiled. That smile, the one he'd worn at Rebecca's funeral. He said, there you are, sister. My, you've made yourself quite a little kingdom, haven't you? Clara said nothing. Merritt's eyes moved, past her, behind her, to Silas, in the doorway. His smile widened. He said, send the boy down, Clara. She said no. He said, Clara, be reasonable. She said no. He said, the boy is a Bennett. The boy belongs to the ranch. She said, the boy belongs to himself. Merritt's smile thinned. He looked at Kellan. He said, climb up, get him. Kellan looked up at the terrace, at Clara, at the rifle in Nathaniel's hand behind her, at the sheer path. He didn't move. Merritt said, Kellan. Kellan said, that's 100 feet of open ground with a rifle on top. Merritt turned, slowly. His voice went cold. I'm paying you to climb. Kellan looked at him. He said, you're paying me to shoot a woman and a child. Are you sure that's what you're paying me to do? The canyon went silent. Elias raised his head. He looked at Kellan. He looked at Merritt. He looked for the first time in a long time like a man about to remember who he was. Merritt kicked his horse forward. 2 steps. Just 2. He said, Kellan, do your job or ride out. Kellan looked at him. Then he did something no one expected. He dismounted. Slow. Deliberate. He swung down from the saddle. His boots hit the wet ground with a soft final sound. He said, Bennett. Merritt said, get back on your horse. Kellan said, I was paid to protect a family. That is what you told me. In the saloon, you said your sister had taken your nephew and you needed help getting him back to safety. Merritt said, that is what this is. Kellan looked up at the terrace, at Clara, at Silas, hiding behind his sister. Kellan said, that is not what this is. He walked away from Merritt's horse. Not far, just 10 feet. But 10 feet was everything. 10 feet said, I am not with you anymore. Merritt stared at Kellan's back for a very long moment. Then he did something Clara had watched him do her whole life. He shifted. The polished older brother. The smiling businessman. The reasonable man. All of it dropped gone, like a coat sliding off. What was underneath was something else. Something Clara had felt her whole life but had never seen up close. Merritt said quietly, fine. He raised his rifle. He pointed it up at the terrace. At Clara. Elias made a sound. Small. Choked. He said Merritt. Merritt didn't turn. Merritt, stop. Shut up, Elias. Merritt, put the gun down. Merritt's finger touched the trigger. Clara saw it. She saw the little muzzle move. And in that moment, that stretched glass-thin moment, she thought about her father, about the room behind her, about the 20 years of stone, about Rebecca, about every quiet woman who had ever been erased from a story like this. She thought, no, not today. She stepped forward, to the very edge of the terrace. She said loud clear so the whole canyon heard, you killed her. Merritt froze. She said, You killed Rebecca. Merritt's rifle wavered. She said, Papa knew. Papa always knew. He found the bottle in her bedside table. Bitter almond. A slow poison. He wrote it down in a journal. In a stone house you don't know exists. Above your head. Right now. Elias whispered, Oh God. Merritt said, You are lying. Clara said, You smiled at her funeral, Merritt. I saw it. I was 20 years old and I saw my brother smile while they lowered his stepmother into the ground, and I did not know what it meant. But I know now. Silence. Kellan turned his head, slowly, toward Merritt. Clara said, You did it because she'd had a son. You did it because Silas was going to grow up and inherit part of the ranch you thought was yours. Merritt's face had gone pale. He said, Elias, shoot her. Elias didn't move. Merritt said louder, Elias, do it now. And Elias, 36 years old, weak, watchful, always watching, reached for his sidearm. Clara hailed her breath. He drew it, slowly. His hand shook so hard she could see it from 100 feet up. He pointed it, not at Clara, at Merritt. Merritt stared at him. He said, Elias, what are you doing? Elias's hand shook. You were just a boy, Merritt said. You didn't see anything. I saw the bottle. You saw nothing. Elias's voice broke. I saw you, Merritt. I was in the pantry. I heard the water pouring. I peeked around the corner and I saw you. Put the powder in her tea, stir it 3 times, carry it upstairs. Merritt said nothing. Elias said, I was afraid of you then. I've been afraid of you every day since. His voice steadied, for the first time in his life. He said, But I'm not afraid anymore. Merritt looked at him. He looked at Kellan, who had not moved, who was watching with cold, careful eyes. He looked up at Clara on the terrace. He looked at the canyon, at the sky, at the stone house he could not see but knew now was there. And he understood. Clara saw it happen. He understood he had lost. He said, You would all take her word, over mine. Nobody answered. He said, After everything I have built. Nobody answered. Clara said, Papa built the ranch, Merritt. Papa built the family. You just wanted to own it. Merritt lowered the rifle. Just a little. For half a second, Clara thought he was giving up. He wasn't. He swung the rifle up, fast, toward Elias. Elias fired first. One shot. Clara heard it echo off the cliffs. She heard the horses jump. She heard Silas gasp behind her. Merritt slid sideways off his saddle. He hit the ground. Not dead. Wounded. Bleeding from the shoulder. The rifle fell from his hands into the mud. Kellan walked over. He picked up the rifle. He looked down at Merritt. He said, Mr. Bennett. Merritt's eyes were wide, his breath fast. Kellan said, I'm going to ride to Silverline. I'm going to bring the sheriff. You are going to lie here in the mud until he arrives. Merritt made a sound, something between a laugh and a sob. Kellan looked at him for another long moment. Then he said quietly, I'm sorry about your shoulder, sir, but I'm not sorry about anything else. He turned. He walked back to his horse. He mounted up. He looked up at Clara. He said, Ma'am, I'll ride hard. 2 days. Clara said, Thank you. He said, Ma'am, I never took the money. She said, What? He said, Your brother's advance. I never spent it. It's in my saddlebag, sealed. I had a feeling. He attached his hat. He said, I'm going home to my boy after this, ma'am. I'm done with this life. She said, Kellan. Who said, Yes, ma'am. She said, There was another man, a man named Vern Reeves. My brother hired him too. Kellan's jaw tightened. He said, Skinny fella, bad teeth, rides a chestnut with a nicked shoe. She said, Yes. He said he was with us to Springerville. Then Mr. Bennett paid him off and sent him back north. Said he'd done his part. Clara said, His part being. Kellan said, Watching you, making sure you got to the canyon and stayed. Clara felt something settle in her chest. Every strange sound in the night, every footprint at the edge of camp. She had not been imagining it. She said, Where is he now? Kellan said, Silverline, drinking probably. He is not the kind who runs. He thinks he did nothing wrong. Clara said, Tell the sheriff about him. Kellan said, I will, ma'am. He touched his hat again. He rode. Elias stood over Merritt. He had not moved. He had not lowered his gun. He was breathing hard. His face was wet. Clara called down, Elias. He looked up. She said, "Come up." He said, "Clara, he needs a doctor." She said, "Bind the wound, then come up. Nathaniel will help you." Nathaniel was already moving down the path. Between them, they got Merritt patched up. Not gently, not cruelly, just done. Tourniquet, pressure, bandages from a saddlebag. Merritt tried to speak twice. Both times Elias said, "Not to me." The third time he said nothing at all. They tied him to a tree, where he couldn't reach a horse, where he couldn't reach a weapon. And then Elias, slowly, unsteadily, like a man who had aged 50 years in 20 minutes, climbed the path to the stone house. He stepped into the room. He stopped. He looked around, at the tools, at the workbench, at the spring dripping in the corner. He whispered, "He built this." Clara said, "Yes." Elias said, "How long?" 20 years. Elias's hands were shaking. He sat down on the edge of the cot. He put his face in his hands. He said, "I should have said something. A long time ago. I should have said something." Clara didn't answer at first. Silas came out from behind her. He walked over to Elias. He looked at his older brother, this stranger, this man who had barely acknowledged him at the funeral, and he did something Clara did not expect. He put his small hand on Elias's shoulder. He said, "You said something today." Elias looked up. His eyes were red. He said, "It's not enough." Silas said, "It's a beginning." And Clara, watching from the doorway, thought he sounds like Rebecca. He sounds exactly like Rebecca. They waited 2 days. Merritt survived, barely. Nathaniel rode down twice a day to check on him, to change bandages, to bring water. Clara did not go down. She could not look at him, not yet. She stayed in the stone house with Silas. She cooked. She read to him. She let him tell her about the wooden horse Nathaniel had whittled. She let him fall asleep in her lap. Elias stayed too, on the terrace. He would not come inside the stone house a second time. He said he had not earned it yet. Clara did not argue. On the second day, she came out to the terrace. She sat down next to him. She said, "Elias." He said, "Yes." She said, "Papa knew about you seeing it. He wrote it in the journal." Elias closed his eyes. She said, "He didn't blame you. He said, 'I remember exactly.' He said Elias is weak, but he is not evil. There is a difference." Elias's mouth moved. No sound came out. She said, "He said, 'Reach him if you can.'" Elias said, "Papa said that." "Yes." Elias put his head in his hands. He said, "He forgave me." Clara said, "He was waiting for you." Elias wept then, silently, shoulders shaking, the way men weep when they haven't wept in a very long time. Clara did not touch him, did not comfort him. She sat beside him. She sat beside him a while. That was enough for one afternoon. The sheriff came on the morning of the third day. Kellan rode in beside him. A deputy, 2 townsmen as witnesses. Whitcomb the lawyer, sweating in his coat, riding a mule he clearly resented. And behind them, hands tied to his saddle horn, head down, a 4th rider. Vern Reeves. Clara saw him and knew. She said to Nathaniel, "Is that your cousin?" Nathaniel looked down. His face was hard. He said, "Yes." She said, "I'm sorry, Nathaniel." He said, "Don't be. He made his choices." They came into the canyon slowly, cautiously. The sheriff was a man named Aldrich, 50, gray mustache, slow eyes. He looked at Merritt, tied to the tree. He looked at Kellan. He looked up at Clara. He said, "Miss Bennett." She said, "Sheriff." He said, "I understand there's been a shooting." She said, "There has." He said, "And an accusation." She said, "There is," and he said, "May I come up?" She said, "Yes." She showed him the journal. She showed him the letter. She translated her father's handwriting for him when he squinted at it. She told him about the bottle, the bitter almond, the pantry, the boy who had watched his brother pour poison into his stepmother's tea and had held that secret too long. Aldrich read for an hour. When he was done, he sat back. He rubbed his face. He said, "Miss Bennett." She said, "Yes." He said, "I have known your father for 31 years. She said, "I know." He said, "This is his handwriting." She said, "Yes." He said, "And Elias Bennett is willing to testify." Elias was standing in the corner. He said, "I am." Aldrich nodded. He said, "Then I have a job to do." He stood up. He walked to the door. He turned back. He said, "Miss Bennet, I am sorry it took this long." She said, "It wasn't your fault, Sheriff." He said it was somebody's fault, and someday I'll figure out whose. Then he walked down the path to arrest her brother. Whitcomb, the lawyer, stayed. He was sweating even more now. He said, "Miss Bennet, there is one more matter." She said, "Yes." He said, "The will I read in my office was not the only will." She said, "I know." He blinked. "You know." She said, "My father wrote to me before he died." He explained. Whitcomb sat down, heavily, in the wooden chair her father had built. He said, "Miss Bennet, I've been carrying a burden for 11 months. She said, "Tell me." He said, "Your father came to me a year ago, in secret. He drafted a second will. He had it witnessed in Santa Fe. It was filed with the territorial court." She said, "I know," he said. "He instructed me to read the false will publicly, to let your brothers believe they had won." He said, "If I read the true will in silver line, you would not survive the week." Clara said, "He was right." Whitcomb looked down at his hands. He said, "I've been afraid every day, waiting for you to reach the canyon, waiting for the truth to come out." Clara said, "What does the true will say?" Whitcomb reached into his coat. He pulled out a thick folded document, sealed, stamped, filed. He said, "It says everything." He handed it to her. She opened it. She read, "The Bennett Ranch, the land, the house, the cattle, the accounts, the blacksmith shop in Silver Line, all of it." To Clara, Merritt received $500. Elias received $2,000. The bulk of the estate went to his daughter and to his youngest son, to my daughter Clara Bennett, in trust for herself and for her brother Silas Bennett. I leave the whole of the Bennett ranch and its accounts. She has been the true keeper of this family. Since her mother died, she has raised her brother. She has held our home together. She is my heir in every sense that matters. And it is only the cruelty of the law and the danger of my eldest son that prevented me from saying so in life. Let this document say it now. Clara Bennett is my daughter. She is my inheritor. She is the strongest of my children and the finest. Let no man contest this. Signed, sealed, witnessed. Santa Fe, Jonah Bennett. Clara read it 3 times. Then she set the paper down. She put her palms flat on the wooden table her father had carved. She did not cry. She was past crying. She looked at Whitcomb. She said, "Thank you for keeping it safe." He said, "Miss Bennet, I am very sorry for what you have been through." She said, "You did what he asked." He said, "Yes." She said, "Then we are done, Mr. Whitcomb. You may go home." He stood. He touched his hat. He walked out. She sat alone in the stone room. The water dripped. She whispered, "Papa, I hear you now." The sheriff took Merritt back to Silver Line that afternoon. Vern Reeves went with them cursing under his breath. Elias rode with them too. He would testify. He would tell the court about the bottle, about the pantry, about the years of silence. Before he left, he went to the base of the path. He looked up at Clara on the terrace. He said, "Clara." She said, "Elias." He said, "I don't expect anything from you." She said, "I know." He said, "But if you ever someday need me for anything, I will come." She looked at her second brother, 36 years old, broken, trying. She said, "Elias." "Yes." She said, "The south pasture is yours. Papa left it to you in the false will for a reason. He was giving you a chance." He blinked. "But the true will," she said, "I'm adding it back. You will build something there. You will make it good. That is your work now." He could not speak. She said, "Go with the sheriff. Tell the truth. Come see me when it is done." He nodded. He rode. That night, Clara sat with Silas on the terrace. The stars came out slowly, one at a time. Silas leaned against her shoulder. He said, "Sister." She said, "Yes." He said, "Is it over?" She thought about the question. She said, "The dangerous part, yes." He said, "What's the other part?" She said, "The building part." He said, "What are we building?" She thought about it. She said, "A life." He nodded. He said, "That sounds nice." She said, "It will be." He said, "Sister." "Yes." "I don't want to leave the stone house." She said, Sweetheart, we don't have to. He looked up at her. He said, But Papa left you the ranch. She said, I know. And someday we will visit it. We will run it. But this is home now. He smiled, a big, wide 9-year-old smile. He said, Good. She kissed the top of his head. The stars burned above. Nathaniel came up the path in the morning. He had ridden out with the sheriff to the mouth of the canyon, then come back. He had not asked to stay. He had just come back. Clara was outside, feeding Buck. Silas was helping her. Nathaniel took off his hat. He said, Clara. She said, Nathaniel. He said, I have to file a report with the territorial office. She said, yes. He said, it will take about a month. She said, yes. He said, I was wondering. She waited. He said, I was wondering if I could file it from here. She looked at him. She said, from here. He said, I can pitch my tent at the base of the path. I won't be in the way. I just don't want to leave you both alone until things are settled. She looked at him for a long time. He was not asking for what she thought he might be asking for, not yet. He was just asking to be near. She said, yes, Nathaniel, you can stay. He put his hat back on. Hein said, thank you, Clara. That was all. Silas grinned. Silas had been grinning at Nathaniel for 2 weeks. Silas knew things Clara was still learning to admit. The seasons turned. The court case took 4 months. Elias testified. Kellan testified. Whitcomb testified. Vern Reeves testified reluctantly after the deputy explained what perjury cost. The doctor who had attended Rebecca's death was found retired in Tucson, and he too testified. He said he had suspected something at the time. He said he had never had the courage to write it down. Merritt was convicted of attempted murder, for the raised rifle in the canyon, for the paid gunman, for the plot against Clara and Silas. He was sentenced to 20 years in the territorial prison at Yuma. Clara did not attend the sentencing. She stayed in the canyon. She had a garden to plant. The garden. She started it on a small terrace below the stone house. The overflow from the spring, clean and cold and endless, ran down a channel her father had carved. She followed his notes in the journal. He had planned this too, 20 years ago. She planted squash. She planted corn. She planted beans in the old way, climbing the corn stalks, holding the soil. She planted tomatoes. She planted a small row of herbs Rebecca had loved. She planted flowers because Amelia had loved flowers. And Clara wanted her mother to have a place in this land too. Silas helped. He was stronger now. His cough was gone. He had color in his face. He grew 2 inches in the first summer. He ate like a wolf pup. Aita came to visit that autumn. She rode down from the northern country on a small pinto horse. Alone, 90 years old and riding alone. Clara went out to meet her. She said, grandmother. Aita smiled. She said, you called me that. Clara said, it felt right. Aita nodded. She said, then it is right. Aita stayed for a week. She taught Clara about the plants of the canyon. Which ones healed, which ones harmed. She taught Silas how to listen to birds. She sat with Clara on the terrace one evening. She said, your father was afraid. Clara said, of what? Of dying before you were ready. Was I ready? Aita smiled. She said, you are here. Clara thought about that. She said, grandmother, why did you help him? Aita was quiet for a while. She looked at her hands, old hands, cracked and gentle at once. She said, I had a husband once. Clara waited. Aita said, he died in a war his people lost. I do not speak of that war. It hurts still. Clara said nothing. Aita said, I had a son. I was 7. He got the fever the winter after his father died. I sat with him 3 nights. He did not wake on the 4th morning. Clara reached over, took the old woman's hand. Aita let her. She said, I had a daughter too. She grew up. She married a man from the north. She writes to me sometimes. Not often. It has been many years since I have seen her face. She looked at the canyon walls turning red in the sunset. She said, when your father came to me, a white rancher hat in his hand asking about water. I saw the same thing in his eyes I had seen in my own. The wanting to protect, the knowing you cannot always. She squeezed Clara's fingers. I helped him because he asked, but also because I could not save my own. And sometimes the only way we heal is by helping someone else keep what we could not keep. Clara held the old woman's hand. Neither of them spoke for a long while. The sun went down. Aita left in the morning. Before she rode out, she pressed something into Silas's hand. It was a small carved bird, bone, old. She said, "This is for you, little brother." Silas said, "Thank you." She said, "Remember, some roots need stone." Silas said, "Yes, ma'am." She rode north. Clara watched until she was a dot on the horizon. Nathaniel stayed. He built a small cabin at the base of the path, not in the stone house, not on the terrace, but close. Close enough to see her lantern in the evening. He said it was for the survey work. Clara let him have the story. He rode out every few weeks, filed reports, came back with supplies, brought Silas books, brought Clara seeds, brought news from town. He never pushed. He never asked. How was Clara realized slowly? The first man in her life who had shown up and stayed without demanding anything. Her father had shown up. Her father had stayed. But her father had been silent. Her father had loved from behind a wall. Nathaniel was not behind the wall. Nathaniel was just there. One evening in the second autumn, Clara sat on the terrace, watching the sun go down. Silas was inside reading a book Nathaniel had brought him. Something about stars. Nathaniel walked up the path. He sat down beside her. They watched the light turn the canyon walls from red to gold to violet. He said, "Clara." She said, "Yes." He said, "I have to tell you something." She said, "All right." He said, I did not just come here because my father sent me." She looked at him. He said, "That is why I first came, but that is not why I stayed." She said, "Why did you stay?" He looked out at the canyon. He said, "The first time I saw you in the canyon, with your rifle up and your little brother behind the rock, and your hands bleeding from clearing thorn brush." He stopped. Uda said, "Clara, I thought I have never seen a woman like this." She waited. Uda said, "I thought I want to know her for the rest of my life, if she'll let me." She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Nathaniel." He said, "Yes." She said, "Are you asking me something?" He said, "I am asking if I can keep asking." She smiled. She could not help it. She said, "Yes, Nathaniel, you can keep asking." He nodded. He did not move to touch her. He just sat beside her. That was enough. That was everything. Winter came. The canyon transformed. The nights got cold. Frost on the mesquite in the morning. The spring in the stone house kept running deep water warmer than the air. Clara's father had built the house facing east so the morning sun poured through the small window and warmed the stone. Silas started his lessons at the mission school in Silverline. Clara rode him in twice a week. She rebuilt her connections with the town slowly, on her own terms. The town, it turned out, wanted to make amends. The women came first. Mitas Delacroix from the boarding house. The women from the church. They brought pies. They brought fabric. They brought apologies, awkward, sincere. Clara accepted them. Not warmly, but honestly. She said, "You did not hurt me. My brother hurt me, and he is in prison now." They said, "But we watched." She said, "Yes, you did." They said, "We are sorry." She said, "I know." That was all. But the town remembered. That was what Clara wanted. Elias came to visit in the spring. He had built a small house on the south pasture. He was running 40 head of cattle. He was working with his hands for the first time in his life. He rode into the canyon on a good horse. He looked older, thinner, but steadier. He and Clara sat on the terrace. He said, "I found something." She said, "What?" He reached into his coat. He pulled out a small tin box. He said, "It was in Papa's desk in the ranch house, behind a false bag. I found it when I was cleaning out his study." Clara took the box. She opened it. Inside 3 photographs. One of Amelia, young, laughing. One of Rebecca, holding baby Silas. And one of Clara, 16 years old, standing in the garden, wiping her hands on her apron, looking straight at the camera with a small, serious smile. Underneath the photographs, a slip of paper. In her father's handwriting, "My 3 loves." Clara held the box in her hands. She did not move for a while. Then, very quietly, she said, "Thank you, Elias." He said, "Clara, yes, I am not going to be a great man. No, Elias, you are not. But I am going to be a better one than I was." She looked at him. She said, "That is enough." He nodded. He rode home. The wedding was in the third spring. It was small. It was in the canyon. Not in the stone house. The stone house was too small. On the terrace below, near the garden, Ayita came. She sat in a chair Nathaniel had built for her. She held Clara's hand. Elias came. He walked Clara down the small aisle they had cleared between the tomato vines. Silas, 12, now tall, healthy, his mother's eyes shining, stood beside Nathaniel as best man. The minister was from Silverline, a young man, kind. He read the vows. Clara said her yes. Nathaniel said his. He kissed her. Silas cheered so loud, a hawk flew off the canyon rim. They ate at long tables under the sky. Elias had brought roast beef. Aita had brought flat bread. Mrs. Delacroix had brought 3 pies. The sun went down. Someone lit lanterns. Someone played a fiddle. Clara danced with her husband on the terrace her father had built. She danced with her little brother. She danced with Elias, clumsy, awkward, laughing. She danced with an old Apache woman who moved slower than she used to, but who smiled the whole time. And when she was tired, she sat down on the stone bench outside the stone house. And she looked up at the small window her father had cut. And she said silently in her heart, "Papa, I am home." The stars burned above. Somewhere in the canyon, a coyote called. Somewhere in the stone house, water dripped into a basin. Somewhere in the grave in the Silverline cemetery, her father was resting. He had been right about everything. She was strong enough. She was ready. The canyon had held her. The stone had remembered. She had inherited nothing. She had inherited everything.